This episode of Cognitive Dissonance is brought to you by our patrons. You fucking rock.
Hey, Tom and Cecil. So I was listening to episode 430, and y'all are talking about Silent Sam and that statue that got yanked down in North Carolina. And I was thinking about how anytime I've spoken to somebody from the South and they're fucking bitching about losing all their history and whatnot, the main complaint is that we shouldn't take down anything that honors, slavery, because you're ruining their history, and the children will be raised to never remember their glorious history. All I ever think is, do you not have fucking Google? Because I remember learning most things about everything from the internet. But if you take down a fucking racist statue, you're suddenly going to lose the ability to just look up your own state's history? I don't know. It's some bullshit. Fuck racism. Glory hole, motherfuckers.
Hey, Cecil and Tom. I am calling to wish a warm hello to the glory hole. No, not you guys. Juno's Glory Hole, which is a presumably unassuming Christian charity in Alaska. And its slogan is food, shelter, and compassion to those in need. You got to go to their website and check out the t-shirts they sell. They're not phallic at all. But they named their unassuming food shelter after the mining term glory hole, which means a hole in a mine shaft where an ore body is mined upwards until it breaks through the surface into the open air. Well, that makes just about as much fucking sense as naming your food shelter glory hole for, its other definition. Well, anyway, I hope that everything that has been fed to people through the glory hole has been as fulfilling as the Lord would have wanted it to be. Glory hole to you guys. Bye.
Be advised that this show is not for children, the faint of heart, or the easily offended. The explicit tag is there for a reason.
Recording live from Glory Hole Studios in Chicago, this is Cognitive Dissonance. Every episode we blast anyone who gets in our way. We bring critical thinking, skepticism, and irreverence to any topic that makes the news, makes it big, or makes us mad. It's skeptical, it's political, and there is no welcome mat. This is episode 430 next. 31. Did. The other 430-ish. I'm going to go with just like naming the tens now. Mm-hmm. I think because then I'm going to be right every time.
430s.
We're in the 400-ish times.
430s. That's what I do with my age.
Right.
So I'm in the 40s.
Like my wife stopped counting at 34. So that's it. Like,
50 years ago.
So we are joined to this episode by David Pakman of the David Pakman Show. Not 100% sure how many power pellets he brought with him. I know Pac-Man jokes are probably very original.
I'm sure he's never heard of Pac-Man.
I was
not
thinking
a single time.
Driving up here, Pac-Man jokes probably were not a staple of his fucking adolescent diet. So I should probably bring these back up in order to make sure that his 6th grade horror memories of middle school.
I wore a blue shirt today, specifically.
But David Pakman, you're the host of the David Pakman Show, which is available on YouTube. It's a podcast. It's also syndicated, if I'm not mistaken, on a number of different stations across the country. Welcome to the Glory Hole, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And everything you said sounds true.
It's probably the only thing we're going to talk about that sounds true today, because I think we want to talk to you a little bit today, or a lot of it today, about Donald Trump, particularly how great has he made America again?
Right. Again.
I'm going to say so great.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm kind of sick of it, actually. So.
He's hired all the best people. So I guess we should start.
That's true.
Let's start with some of the best people.
Yeah.
That Donald Trump, who remember, he did promise that he was going to hire.
He did.
All the best people.
The very best.
I heard or read a story that it sounds to many like he's prepping to fire Attorney General Jeff Sessions, one of the best people, who has recused himself from the Russia investigation. So, David, I'd like to get, I think that's a nice jumping off point. I'd like to get your thoughts on the current row between Trump and Attorney Sessions. And, you know, if you have any sense of whether he will, in fact, fire Sessions, does it seem to you like he's prepping for that? What would the repercussions of that kind of thing be?
Yeah, it seems like he may be laying the groundwork for firing Sessions. He may be laying the groundwork, or others might be laying the groundwork for firing Robert Mueller as well. And I mean, in a normal situation, I would say the repercussions would be presidential. It would end a presidency, right? That would be what I would like to say. But we know that that's just not the case. We know that. I mean, listen, if the N-word tapes come out, it's not going to do anything. Just not the people who voted for him knowing that he had made horrible comments about Hispanic people and mocked a disabled reporter. So it's not going to make a difference. Now there's a new love child story, which may be out of embargo soon, and a doorman will be able to talk about the love child Trump has with his allegedly.
Can we pause real quick? I don't know that I want to think about the idea of a love child with Donald Trump. An illegitimate bastard, maybe.
But I have a question. Would his last name be Snow? Like, would it be, you know, what would his last name be if that's the case?
He'll guard the wall.
Who knows? But I think the point is, it's impossible to say at this point whether, you know, we thought we were at the limit hundreds of times over the last couple of years, and yet it just kind of goes on. So I don't know. I don't know if Sessions will stay or go. It does seem as though there are other people like Roger Stone who are very quickly entering the crosshairs of Robert Mueller, who are trying to get Trump to get rid of Mueller. So Roger Stone, for example, recently put out there that Don Jr. will soon be getting indicted. Might be true, might not be. But the idea is to goad Trump into firing Mueller before that happens, which of course might not even work. So, and your guess, anyone's guess, really is as good as mine.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. So, can anything take him down? Can anything? Do you think? Because what is baffling, I think, to anybody looking at this is how the fuck is this a still functioning presidency? And in fact, do you think that this is a functioning presidency?
It's really not. And here's the thing. If your view of a non-functioning presidency is that fires ravage the entire country as opposed to just parts of it, which are being ravaged by fires, and, you know, every nuclear power plant implodes and cash stops, you know, US dollars stop functioning as a currency. Like, that's not the standard, right? We need to consider the fact that a lot of these government agencies function independently. Certain day-to-day things, you know, gasoline delivery trucks are still going to be driving around no matter what it is, that how crazy the president is. So when you consider what it is that could happen with a non-functioning presidency, we're 90% of the way there. Our longtime allies are now just talking around us when they talk about climate change. Trump's not there. It doesn't matter that Trump's not there. What would Trump's presence add to that? We have allies who are increasingly not sharing information with us because Donald Trump will sometimes just spill it in the Oval Office, like to a Russian spy recruiter, for example. So I think, like, if you apply...
Why is that funny? Wait, why are we laughing about
funny.
that?
It's not funny. It's sad.
Not cry, yeah.
My mighty heart is breaking. Like,
if you apply a reasonable standard, this is close to as bad as it can be before the president is sort of forced out or realizes it's time for them to go.
But it's been like that for how long, though? Because
since
this is
2016.
Yeah, this has been like that for a while. I mean, he has done things, and it feels like every day he does something exponentially worse than the day before. And the previous day, you're like, this has got to be the day, right? And then the next day something happens, you're like, but this has got to be the day, right? And it keeps going on and on and on. It gets worse and worse and worse. And we just feel like we're just stalling and waiting. I don't even know what we're waiting for at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I want to know genuinely, Cecil and I talked about this before the show, and I think this is a great segue. Like, is this our best case scenario right now? What we have is essentially a lame duck presidency. Is this the best case scenario politically for the country?
Yeah, it's a very reasonable question, and it's shockingly scary that actually may be the case. Like this might actually be the least bad scenario, which is a sort of impotent Trump remaining for the remainder of this term. Because remember, if he gets impeached or if he's forced into resignation, which I have no idea if that is even remotely likely to happen, but more than likely, unless you implicate the vice president, Mike Pence becomes vice president, and he will be significantly more ideologically conservative and dogmatic, not as scandal-riddled as Trump, and he may accomplish significantly more than what Trump may be able to do in the remainder of his term. So it actually may be the best scenario that a sort of scandal-ridden, farcical Trump remains.
Well, that's Jesus Christ. Let me ask you about that too a little bit, because I have some questions of what your thoughts are. So, let's say, for instance, that Trump, because there's no forcing him to resign. Like, I think we can take that off the table. Like, there's no way that guy would be forced to resign. I literally can't imagine a set of circumstances where he would cede the point, right?
Where he
okay, you got me. I think that's a guy who, if he were put in handcuffs and a fucking orange jumpsuit, would be like, still the president till you make me.
He'd be calling the handcuffs fake news.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
so like, there's a level of self-denial there that is just so extraordinary. I can't imagine. So, but let's say Pence takes the reins. There's no mandate with Pence. I mean, there was barely a mandate with Trump. There was a mandate only from sort of a hard line group of people that wanted to make America racist again, or whatever the slogan is. But like, Pence has none of that behind him. Like, he's got no political force underneath him. Would he then just turn into a placeholder president, do you think?
Yeah, and on the one hand, he has no mandate, but on the other hand, he also has no case that is building against him to justify obstruction or not letting him do things. Like right now, there are actually really good reasons for anybody who wants to, whether it's Democrats or whether it's sane Republicans, to say, we're not going to do A, B, or C because this is a guy who may be a illegitimate president, may have committed all sorts of crimes in achieving that presidency. If Pence takes over, yeah, it's true. Like, there's no big clamoring for Mike Pence.
That includes from Mrs. Pence, by the way.
It could have been anybody almost as Donald Trump's running mate. But there's no reason to justify total and complete obstruction, which is increasingly what hopefully we're going to start to see.
Well, I mean, I think we're like, one thing I find interesting is like, we've had this presidential power creep, over the last 3 presidencies, right? And so now the executive order is like the king's writ now. But then increasingly with Trump, federal judges are like, you can't do that. Just again happened this week.
Yeah.
Where, federal judges were like, you can't make it easier to fire federal workers that unionize. Like, we're not, we're putting the no on that. So there's a big fucking no stamp that keeps being put on his executive orders. Is there any sense from you that there will be a pushback against presidential power creep as a result of this fucking debacle? I'm looking for silver linings here.
Yeah.
Nope, definitely not. And if anything, it may go the other way. There was actually...
That's a fast no. Wait a minute, David. David, I thought we were friends. We've been talking for 9 minutes. I felt like we had a connection. That hurts my heart space, buddy.
I just don't see any way through which that in fact, the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court nomination, that is a Koch brother supported nomination, and it's part of their plan to actually remove checks and balances, to reduce the number of veto points that can exist, to prevent unchecked power. So I think, if anything, assuming the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh, we're going to see, Trump or not, like, this is beyond Trump now. This is part of the Republican plan for decades now. We're going to see more unchecked power. But by the way, from the same party that claims that they want limited government.
Well, they want to limit it to one person. So there's like, we will limit the government to the new emperor that we appoint. Like, if it's got a red tie, then that's that's where we've limited it to.
What do you think about? So recently, there's been a couple of things that have surfaced, especially after the Manafort convictions, and then after the Cohen guilty plea, and there's recently his CEO came out as somebody who is sort of someone who might be cooperating, and then
so
also
got immunity, right?
Yeah, and then also Trump's Packer is sort of leaking at this point.
Wait, did you say his Pecker?
The Packer,
leaking?
That's the guy's name, Packer, by the way.
Trump's Pecker is leaking?
Well, depends, I guess. So yeah, no, but see, the guy's name is Packer. And
it's amazing.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it great?
That's
Trump's Packer is leaking. Like, I mean, it literally writes itself. But what do you have to think about the other people now that are sort of coming forward after the Cohen plea?
I think they're coming forward not out of any moral duty, but out of a sense of self-preservation. And basically, at this point, it's if you believe that you're in the line of fire, you have to make a judgment call about. It's widely known that Trump will punish people who don't remain loyal to him. But is the punishment going to be worse if you end up sitting in prison or getting indicted by Robert Mueller or whatever it is that you're facing? So I think it is merely the realization from many people surrounding this guy that knowingly or unknowingly crimes were committed and that the cover-up is just falling apart. And they're doing what's best for them and their families, which with the Cohen thing was a big part of it. He said, I just need to do what's best for my family.
And yeah, they're fleeing like, rats from a sinking ship at this point. Did you contribute to the Cohen Kickstarter that he had? I don't know if you heard about this.
Oh, God, he raised a ton of money.
Cohen had a Kickstarter. Did you chip in a little there?
I did not. I admit I didn't do
that. I thought he was like a millionaire. Like, what is he kickstarting? Like, I don't even understand that. Like,
I don't know, but he had to take a $130,000 home equity loan to pay off Stormy Daniels. So, that money came from a home equity loan. I'm going to borrow money so that this porn, that's the fucking mafia boss-esque nature of all of this is so crazily obvious.
Yeah.
It's like all of a sudden it's 1949, and we're being run by Don Trump. It's crazy. He's going to walk around and grab a peach out of the farm stand. What is happening?
Well, it's funny too, because he just came out and said that people who flip should almost be illegal for people to flip.
Don't tell on me.
Yeah.
If you tell on people.
Oh, jeez.
It's hard to even parse what that means, right? So flipping means you tell the truth to federal investigators. Not doing it is illegal. That's a lot of these people are going to jail because they didn't tell the truth. And now Trump says telling the truth to investigators should be illegal.
Okay, but to be fair, though, he was, or rather his spokesperson was concerned that he wasn't allowed to tell even one lie. I mean, you don't even get a freebie. I thought, and correct me, David, because I think you're more well-versed than I am on these issues, but I had always thought that you got one free call when you were arrested and one free lie.
Yeah.
And you don't have to declare, just like if a cop, if you ask a cop, are you a cop?
They have
to say yes, right?
Yeah. And they also can't sit on the side of the highway with their lights off because that's
you have to know. Otherwise, it's entrapment when they set a trap.
Did you think, so when election night happened, that horrible, horrible night where we switched into an alternate universe and we've had to deal with this ever since. Did you think it was going to be this bad? Did you foresee it being this horrible from the very get-go?
Yes. I thought that it was going to be even worse, honestly. I thought it was going to be more the apocalyptic scenario that 5 minutes ago I said is no longer a reasonable standard, that we have some institutions that function well enough that it wouldn't actually get that bad. But no, at 7, I think it was at 22 after 7 p.m. on the East Coast, which was when the early Florida numbers came out, and it was close, right? It kept going back and forth. Hillary Clinton wasn't clearly ahead in Florida. At that point, I realized that it was not going to go any way other than Trump is the next president. And I was having, I quite literally was having waking nightmares about what it was going to be like. And, it's never exactly the way you predict, no matter what scenario you anticipate being bad, in life, it's often bad, but it's not bad in the exact way that you predict. And I think that's what we're seeing. At the time, we didn't realize that it would be an administration basically crippled by not only incompetence, but also potentially dozens of people going to jail or prison and a presidency that in and of itself might be ending prematurely. I assumed it would merely be an international embarrassment, and it's been so much more than that.
We have so much to look forward to.
So I want to ask you about the Russian collusion issue. So I saw something the other day that like Facebook's chief security officer came out the other day and said, look, it's too late for the 2018 elections. We know the 2018 elections have, it's too late to put any safeguards that are meaningful in place in front of those elections. So we know our next set of elections will or has been influenced by Russian operatives. We are in a place where we're clearly in a new Cold War that has a technological component to it with Russia that we're not acknowledging. And yet, like, there has not been evidence. There's been evidence of lots of other weird shit, but there has not been definitive evidence of Russian collusion with the Trump administration other than the meeting that he admitted to out loud and everything.
There's been people who've been indicted by Mueller though too.
Right. But they've been the Russians who've been performing,
right.
But they've not been able to directly tie that line.
Yeah, they haven't tied
outside of the crazy fucking tweets that Trump himself tweeted about, like, my son met with the Russians,
exactly.
Which I don't understand how that's still. So I want to get your thoughts on because again, the Cohen thing, the Manafort thing, these do not have anything to do with Russia. And I want to make sure that those are parsed separately. So I'd like to get your thoughts on Russia and their interference in the U.S. elections, and then the collusion issue.
This is a huge issue, and I think the important thing to understand when we hear that talking point from people like Sean Hannity and others that whatever Cohen and Manafort did, it has nothing to do with Russia. It's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true when it comes to Cohen. We're going to find out. There's now a $50,000 payment that was made to a tech company right around the time of the Hillary Clinton email hacking. It was one that instead of submitting a formal invoice for, Michael Cohen literally wrote 50,000 on a piece of paper and handed it to somebody. So there's a lot of
wait. I'm sorry. I thought I followed the news, and I clearly have missed this story. Like buying a car, like can I just seriously, like buying a car and like writing down a number on a piece of paper
sliding
and sliding it over your desk?
Yeah. So normally the way that Cohen, I mean, listen, I don't want to get off track. Well, maybe we'll go back to that. But
we can get off track. So you can go ahead.
Yeah. As far as Manafort goes, he is someone who had been working in a pro-Russia capacity for decades. He had both the access motive when it comes to financial and ideological motive, and ability to influence Republican policy towards Russia on the eve of the Republican National Convention. The Republican Party, at Manafort's sort of pleading, changed its policy towards Russia. The guy, I mean, so I think that he's very connected to Russia. I think the problem, the Trump Tower meeting is a given, right? I mean, we now know that Trump allegedly knew about it. Everybody knew that they were meeting with a Russian agent, someone representing the Kremlin. That's like very, very cut and dry. So to say, other than that obvious case of Russian collusion, we don't yet have evidence of Russian collusion. Okay. But here's the really important thing. Collusion is not the crime, right? And this can be used either to make the case that there's more to look at, or to say what the right has been saying, which is don't even pay attention to this because collusion's not a crime. Collusion is a sort of catch-all umbrella term, and we're talking here about receiving things of value from foreign countries for the purposes of influencing elections. That's against the law. We're talking about obstruction of justice when it came to figuring out what it was that took place, possible witness tampering, money laundering. So I don't know how useful it is merely to say there was or wasn't collusion. Let's look at the specific crimes that may have taken place and the intent to receive something of value from a foreign country, meaning the dirt on Hillary. Whether or not they got it, the intent to do it is still a crime. So if you're waiting for an indictment that says collusion, that's not going to happen because that's not the crime. But the idea that we just don't need to worry about this Russia thing, I certainly think is not based in evidence.
So I watched one of your videos recently where you are discussing that Trump admitted on Fox just the other day, and I don't even know what day it is because it's only been a week since this fucking madness has ramped up to a speed that I'm not sure I can even follow any longer. But he admitted to one of two crimes on Fox the other day. It depends on whether we believe him or don't believe him. Can you go over that for our listeners?
Sure. So Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to a number of crimes. One of them, or a couple counts actually, are of campaign finance violations in the payment of hush money to mistresses of the candidate, which of course we presume to be Donald Trump, although that hasn't been spelled out. So that relates to the payments that were made to Karen McDougal, former Playboy model and mistress of Trump's, and Stormy Daniels. So they received, Stormy Daniels, it was $130,000. I don't remember exactly what Karen McDougal received.
I think she got $150,000. She got more, right?
Could be. That could be.
That's a little insulting, right? If you're Stormy
is.
Daniels, you're like,
wait,
the
what?
fuck?
Yeah.
She needed to get a better lawyer, apparently, to negotiate.
Yeah.
So if the money came from campaign donations made to the Trump campaign, that's an illegal use of campaign funds. Trump's denying that that's the case. Trump is saying that it was actually the money didn't come from there, which directly means that he is the guy who ultimately paid for it, whether it was through a shell company or by paying off Michael Cohen's second mortgage or however it was that they did it. That means that Trump paid for that, meaning he had a debt to Michael Cohen. That payment or that debt, none of those show up anywhere in Trump's financial disclosures. So it can't both be true that the money didn't come from the campaign and that it's perfectly fine for Trump not to have disclosed that he made the payment. So either it was an illegal campaign donation or Trump lied on his financial disclosures, both of which would be criminal.
What seems evident is that we don't, for whatever reason, like, we've just decided we don't care, right? Because it's out loud now.
Well, we didn't care about his tax returns.
What do we care about? I'm asking that question for realsies. Like, why don't, like, isn't this it? Isn't, like, we have, what I don't understand is, like, we're just like some guys, right? We're all just like some dudes, and we're sitting around and it's like, well, we know that there's evidence of collusion, right? We know that there's evidence of collusion. We know the Trump Tower meeting happened. That's admitted on Twitter. It's out loud and everything in front of the whole world. And, like, now we know that there's this, payment to the mistresses that he was a part of, either one way or the other. It's deeply problematic. Like, when are we going to officially care? Are we going to officially, or do we just not give a shit? Like, what are the thing? Like, what has to happen? Because, like, I'm worried if we give him too much time, we're just going to go to war with North Korea or something.
Yeah,
to distract us. Like, we're going to get a wag the dog moment.
The people on the left who are outraged by this stuff are not outraged enough to basically go out and do civil disobedience and be out in the streets until something happens. Even if it's you force Trump to go and say, we got to put the National Guard out there to start repressing speech, which would be a scandal in and of itself, right? So, and I'm not blaming the left for that. People are busy. People have to make money. Wages have been stagnant for 40 years. So it's not a criticism. It's just, it's apparently not crazy enough for the left to go to that point. Then you've got the right, which is completely co-opted by the idea that if they go after Trump, that it's going to be, I guess, Democratic victories for who knows how long. And for them, I mean, there were people at Trump rallies wearing shirts that said, I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat. And that's
I saw that, yeah.
That basically sums up the perspective, which is it doesn't matter how bad this stuff is. We don't want to do anything that might put a Democrat in the White House or in power, full stop.
But do they not understand that, like, the other candidate doesn't win now? Like, there seems to be still like a whataboutism with Hillary that's going on. Like,
yeah. Well,
do you think there's a misunderstanding that, like, well, if we unelect Trump, then the runner-up gets the fucking crown? Like, is this like Miss America rules that people are working off of?
That's partially coming from the top, because in every interview, like, I mean, in that Fox News interview you mentioned, when Trump was asked about the payments, he was also, by the way, in that interview, he started giving reasons why it wouldn't be a good idea to impeach him, which is, that's a red flag. When you start arguing for why it's really a bad idea to impeach him,
we'd all be broke.
Yeah, we would all be poor and the stock market would crash. In that interview, he talked about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama when asked very specific questions about things he had done and things he would do. So part of the whataboutism is coming from the top. But then there's this other issue, which is that there are people. So if you're a Trump supporter, you want to reject the idea that he may be anything other than a totally legitimate president because you worry about what happens if Russia collusion was true, if Russia helped him win, then this guy may not actually be a legitimate president. But that's happening on the left also. There's a contingent of leftists who are worried, who didn't like Hillary, who are worried that if Russia was part of the reason Trump won, does that somehow legitimize Hillary? Does that mean Hillary was a better candidate than I think she is? And I think that these issues have to be totally disaggregated. If crimes took place, then that's got to be dealt with, aside from whatever implications you might feel about your candidate.
What do you think about Trump's erosion of the sort of trust in the media in our country? What do you think that this is sort of a plan he's had since the beginning, or is this something that he's just doing just to protect himself? Like, what do you and do you think that he has seriously eroded America's trust in the media?
He has seriously eroded trust. We know that from extensive public polling that's out there. Trump realized that the attacking the media thing was a useful approach when, during the campaign, he would point to the media people at the back and talk about how they're terrible people. And he slowly but surely would get sort of fuel added to that fire by his followers. And that's how you ended up with fake news. That's how you ended up with him saying, maybe we need journalism licenses, or we need to make it easier to sue media outlets. I think that it's really important not to glorify prior politicians who made terrible decisions. So I'm not saying George W. Bush was great in any way. I'm not saying that. But there was a clear line that George W. Bush wouldn't cross, which was that at no point did you get the feeling that he thought that the media as an institution had to be limited or suppressed.
Right.
And his policies were a disaster, and he didn't like the things that media was saying about him, but you didn't get that direct attack on media as an institution. Even attacking individual media outlets is at least a little bit more reasonable, although I still don't think the president should do it, than saying the media is the enemy of the people. So I think it's had a huge effect. I think Trumpists are loving it, and Trump's going to keep doing it because it's been working for him.
Is there any way to sort of turn back the tide of this? Is there any way to turn, that we can fix this in some way? Because it really does feel like there's a large portion of America that is not going to listen to anything that a media outlet says, because they don't trust the media as a source anymore. And now there's no way to sort of tell them what a fact is.
The answer is kind of boring, and it's something that the left is not that good at, which is you need to win at the state and local level. You need to win in order to influence the judges that are appointed in state courts and at lower level federal courts. This also does relate to who's president, because basically, you can protect media institutions by having the right people in courts that aren't going to find against media outlets. So it's an uphill battle, but that's the insurance policy that media really needs.
When you started out in politics, have you always been sort of left-leaning, or were you ever sort of centrist at all?
No, I think when I was in high school and I took some economics classes, and they were like your standard neoclassical economics classes, I didn't realize that there were other views. So it was just sort of like, oh, all right, this is how economics works. Sounds good. So I ended up kind of being a little more fiscally conservative. And then as I learned more about demand side economics and sort of like how economics actually works, not just what they write about in a textbook, I definitely moved to the left on those issues as well.
Why does economics, do you think, why does it have such a right-leaning bias to it?
Well, if you imagine that people are completely rational and always make the best decision on the basis of all the known information, then it makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, that's a fantasy world. Like, that's just not how the world works.
Yeah.
Once you introduce the fact that people are complex and people are biased and influenced by different cognitive biases and understand that, you realize that it's great to understand how the world would work if everybody was a perfectly rational actor. And that would sort of lead you to like conservative economics. As soon as you introduce any amount of actual critical thinking and think about how are people actually in the world, you realize that textbook economics doesn't really make any sense. And this is, by the way, coming from someone who has undergraduate and graduate degrees in economics.
Yeah, it from what you've described, it seems like a misapplication of theory versus practice, right? Like it's what is that? But it has to be like willfully done at this point, because there's so much we know, like in terms of like how people really behave. Like behavioral economics doesn't, and the study of that would not seem to match like how we're promoting financial economics, right?
Definitely. And this is one of the massive problems that exists in economics departments on campuses all around the country, which is you really should be teaching alternative economic models and behavioral economics if you're going to give somebody a serious economics education. Just teaching supply and demand curves is how you end up with people thinking, let's just give rich people tax cuts and everything will be great. And obviously we know that doesn't work in the real world.
So David, if people were going to find your stuff on the internet, where would they look?
The best place is davidpakman.com. Everything is there. Our videos are there. Our podcasts are there. Of course, we have this YouTube channel, which recently surpassed 500,000 subscribers, where we put all of our videos. And people can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify. It's almost too easy to find the show. I apologize for that. People keep coming across it. But our website is like the central hub for everything.
Well, we'll put a link to a lot of these things on this week's show notes. David, thanks so much for joining us today. Very, very enlightening conversation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you having me.
Ready to stick it in the glory hole? Get links to their Facebook, Twitter, and if you still use it, Google Plus account at their website, dissonancepod.com. If you need to be all discreet about it, contact them by email at dissonance.podcast@gmail.com. Or you can call and leave a ransom message at 740-74-DOUBT. That's 740-743-6828. Want to hear Cognitive Dissonance commercial free and gain access to exclusive content, including full patron-only shows? Head to patreon.com/dissonancepod and become a patron to support the show on a per-episode basis. Love commercials? Not ready to become a patron? Give the guys a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. Or tell your buddies in the drunk tank about the show. We want to send a big sloppy glory hole to all the patrons and people who rate us. You fucking rock.
So I want to talk, Tom. I want to stop for a second. And so there's been a lot of talk about John McCain, senator from Arizona, passed away this last week. He stopped taking medicine for his brain-urlar cancer.
I will say, like, my Flipboard, was set, I get notifications on it. And it was like, John McCain has said he's not taking any more medicine for brain cancer. And then like 20 minutes later,
I know, 20 minutes later,
John McCain, dead. It's like, well,
that medicine wasn't doing much. I just want to say, like,
I'm just saying,
whatever. Okay.
John McCain isn't going to take any more aspirin because he's dead now.
He's not going to do it.
Yeah. I'm going to discontinue the treatments.
Yeah. I know. Like, as soon as they stop giving it to him,
all dead people discontinue treatment.
Yeah, eventually.
Right? Like, is he still on chemo? I mean, he's embalmed. So
they just keep him in the machine for a while. I want to say, like on my Facebook feed, especially because he passed away, and a bunch of people on my Facebook feed are in two different camps. There's one side that is...
Wait, can I just... There's polarization of views on your Facebook feed?
Yeah, on my Facebook feed.
I just wanted to clarify that moment.
So one side is, fuck that guy. That guy never did anything for me. He's fucking total douchebag. The other side is, hey guys, RIP, that sort of thing. So it's kind of this sort of casket half full, casket half empty sort of thing that they're doing. And,
I don't know which is better.
And to be perfectly honest, the casket is always full. So.
I was going to say, like,
unless
with a glass of water, I know which the optimist side is. With a casket, you're like, I don't know. I don't. We got half.
Can't be sure. Can't be sure. Yeah.
Then that implies there's another half that didn't make it to the casket. You're
someone's
like,
weekend of burning his upper torso, voting in Congress.
Did we bring the whole guy in? Jim.
He's just sitting in a sports car, no lower half, just putzing around down the road.
Jim always takes the bottom half.
Oh, hey,
I don't know why
Jim,
he
what
takes
are you
that
doing
home.
with that half?
This is not you don't take leftovers. All right, this is a funeral home. There are no doggy bags.
Jim, what happened to all the lube? So I wanted to talk about his actual political policies with you and sort of go over, I'm not going to go in extensive because there's like 25 pages on Wikipedia that, he had an extensive career. Right. So there's just so much to go over. So I highlighted things that might be important to us, like something we might talk about on the show and talk about his position. So you mentioned when we first came in today, you said, I remember when he came into the political sort of, as the president, as a presidential
candidate,
hopeful.
Yeah.
He had, you and I were a little like, okay, maybe this will be kind of cool because who knows where he's gonna land, because he had been politically moderate for a long time.
Right. There was an idea that like, hey, if we have to have a Republican, this might be one that we could get behind, where we could be like, all right, not everything, but not, I don't hate everything. I don't love everything, but maybe there's going to be that moment where you get to be middle of the road. And I think you and I share the same frustration that, like, I would like to be able to be more genuinely considerate of both candidates in terms of, like, well, what do they stand for? What are their views? But, like, the Republicans we've been presented with in the course of my voting lifetime have been so egregiously awful on social issues and economic issues
that you just can't,
that I've been like, fucking, I can't do this. And I was really hopeful that McCain might represent somebody that I could say, look, I'm not there with you on everything. I'm not even there with you on some important things. But I am with some other issues that are important to me, Yeah. And it didn't turn out that way.
It didn't. And one of the things I will note from McCain running was a moment that is being played on repeat now on Facebook. You can find it everywhere. There's tons of videos of this. And there's two different instances where people in town halls while he was running said, I don't like Obama, he's a Muslim, or I don't trust him, he's a terrorist. They said some horrible shit.
I remember this.
And he took the mic back, and his comment was, look, he's a good man.
Right.
We just disagree on some fundamental issues, but don't be afraid of him being your president, basically. Like, don't be afraid if he gets in charge. Like, you don't need to do that. And politically now, that would not be the thing that someone would say.
You don't think that Trump, given the same opportunity.
10 years means a lot, Tom, especially in political discourse in this country, because you look at that and you're just like, oh, we were wide-eyed idealists back then.
Do they know that, like, I will say this about, unabashedly about McCain, and I disagreed with him on so many things, but he was always a man who approached politics with a level of civility and respect. Like, he didn't do any of this bombastic. Even when he was even when you and I were, like, hard against him during the presidential campaign, when he swung hard right, when he, like, appointed Sarah Palin as
that is
vice
pretty negative, though. I mean, I will say that's a massive negative.
But he was still civil and respectful. He did not engage in the fear-based, bombastic bullshit.
It's the fear-based stuff. For sure.
That I think has really come to make politics right now so unpalatable to follow.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about a lot of these things. I'm going to really skim a lot of these things that were his political policies to make sure that we could sort of get through most of them. He was against publicly funded healthcare and universal healthcare. He favored tax credits instead. He voted in favor of proceeding with a motion to debate healthcare legislation, but subsequently voted against a bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act without a replacement, which again is sort of a shift from, his 2000-ish. This was his policy, his tax cut policy against universal health care was sort of what he was running on in 2008.
Right.
Shifted a little bit in 2017, voted against the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, and then also voted against the repeal twice against the repeal of the ACA.
And I think his position, as I recall it, wasn't that he didn't want to repeal it. He didn't want to repeal it without a replacement.
Without a replacement.
Because he recognized, the value that it had to so many millions of Americans. Like, you can't just leave them high and fucking dry.
But if he had a plan, he would have. Like, if there was a plan to let him off easy, he probably would have done something.
Right.
So he was against network neutrality unless evidence of abuse exists, is what he said.
God, it's so
which is stupid. He said, in 2007, he said, when you control the pipe, you should be able to profit from your investment. By the way, McCain received $890,000 in campaign contributions over his career from companies opposed to net neutrality.
Yeah, let's wait and make sure that there's a problem and then solve it after people are already injured.
Yeah, don't whatever you do, don't introduce something that people can, abuse and try to legislate around that, maybe foresee a few problems ahead of time. No, don't do that. Wait until there's an actual problem. Like, Jesus.
Well, companies don't have any record of abusing consumers. Yeah. So that's nice. Right? Certainly, like, Verizon would never throttle data to firefighters, for example.
Come on. Don't be ridiculous.
I mean, there's not any history of that happening constantly because there's literally a financial requirement to do it whenever possible.
No kidding. He was for Native American affairs, and there's a bunch of things in here that he sort of introduced and pushed forward. There was a lot of, he wanted to make sure he was a big supporter of Native Americans, and that came through in a lot of the policies and the bills he introduced. He had a lot. I didn't list them all because there's a huge foreign policy portion of the Wikipedia article that talks about this. And he had a lot of hawkish policies. Like his policies were very hawkish. It's not that there aren't a lot of Democrats with hawkish policies too, but I disagreed with a lot of these hawkish policies. We'll get into a couple specifically with Iraq, but there were a lot of hawkish policies.
Did you find that surprising or not surprising given his war record?
I don't find, we're going to talk about it later, but I don't find the torture thing surprising, but I do kind of find the hawkish policies. And, talk about Israel, like he was very pro-Israel, right? Those sorts of things. Whatever Israel wanted to do, he basically supported.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on that. I always wonder if fighting in a war means that you have to sort of believe in the value of armed conflict. Otherwise, that portion of your life
doesn't make
would
sense.
Then be meaningless, right?
Yeah.
And I can see it the other way too, like coming out of that and being like, man, that sucked and nobody should have to do that.
Right.
But I can see the psychological angle from both sides.
Sure.
And I'm just curious.
Yeah. In 2007, he said he would immediately close Guantanamo Bay and move all prisoners to Fort Leavenworth and basically expedite their judicial proceedings in their cases. And he voted against restoring habeas corpus to detainees in 2007.
Those two policies seem at odds with each other,
don't
right?
they? Yeah.
How are you going to expedite judicial proceedings if they don't have...
I don't know.
Rights,
there's a lot of this stuff. And we talked about this before we started recording. It seems like, it's, you look at some of these policies and they seem like they fly in the face of the other one. And I understand that voting on legislation isn't easy.
Right.
There's a lot of things that are involved in these things. So that it's probably not just a bill that says, let's do the habeas corpus thing. It's habeas corpus and we'd like to have this land in Montana do this thing.
Right,
and you know what I mean? Like there's always...
Everything's mushed together.
Yeah, it's always smashed together. So it's hard to decide was that the main deciding factor in that bill? I don't know. But there's a lot of stuff that feels like it just sort of flies in the face of the other thing that he did.
Yeah, and I think that's why, over his career, he's often been referred to as a maverick.
Yeah.
And it's like, we talked earlier, I wonder if he was less of a maverick and more of somebody who just read the wind very carefully.
Yeah. And if that's the case, then that to me says you weren't voting on your principles. You were voting on what was politically, gainful. Can
I ask you about that? Is his job to vote on his principles or is his job to represent the principles of his constituency?
It depends. I mean, I guess it depends on how he runs and how he sells it to the people. Because if he sells, I'm voting for, what I think is right and the people vote him in, then I think that if he said that out loud, then you vote on what you think is right. But if you're saying, I represent you and this is what I want, I'm going to vote for you. And, and if you're selling that, then I think you need to follow that.
Because I always wonder about that, and I think there's different political views that are equally valid about that. But I always wonder, if I as a candidate, do I represent you in the sense that I show up and I am there to be representative of that constituency? Or does the constituency choose somebody and say, this person most represents us?
I think that's how you sell it.
There's an order of operations that I think is interesting in terms of how we look at a candidate. And how we look at what a candidate's responsibilities are.
Yeah, and I think it's how they sell it. I think it's how they sell it to you.
Yeah.
So if they're standing in front of you saying, I'm going to go there and vote my conscience, they're saying me. They're saying
my conscience
me.
Is the broad is now representative
and
of
now
your collective
I'm saying if you think I'm a good principled person, you will send me to Congress and I will vote how I think as a good principled person. But if you say, I'm going to vote for you, I'm out there fighting for you, well, then you've got to listen to your constituencies and you've got to sort of have your finger on the pulse of what they think. I don't know.
Which do you want? Do you want in a candidate? Because I know which one I want.
I just think that the bureaucracy of the second one seems a little difficult.
Yeah,
I think it's hard to gauge a whole group of people like that.
My feeling is one is lying.
Yeah.
And one can be honest. You could elect me and say, Tom, you are. Oh God, I hope this never happens.
No.
You are most like us. Go represent us. But I don't think I could say I am here and I'm this sort of conduit or blank slate through which the constituency's greater ideas pass through.
Yeah.
That's fucking government by ultimate committee. And that would be just a fucking nightmare. And you get it wrong every time.
And there's no real way to get that group of people, I don't think, to really poll them and to really figure out what they want, have your finger on the pulse constantly of what. And no matter what, no matter where you come from, there's going to be Democrats and Republicans where you are. So are you listening to the Democrats too? Probably not. You know what I mean?
You run out the door like, hold on, I gotta ask the guys what they think.
I gotta tell.
Hey, everybody, what do I vote on this thing? Yeah.
In 2007, voted against waterboarding. Basically said waterboarding was it's not a complicated procedure. It's torture. And he also supported the 2003 invasion of Iraq. But in his book later said the principal reason for invading Iraq, that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, was wrong. The war, with its cost in lives and treasure and security, can't be judged as anything other than a mistake. A very serious one, and I have to accept my share of the blame for it.
Fucking kudos for that, right?
I mean, admittedly, that's somebody who's saying, I fucked up.
Yeah.
I'll own that shit.
I still, what's amazing is that we live in a world where we went to war with a country on accident.
Yeah.
Not on accident, but we went to war with a country on false pretense.
Totally on false. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that somehow is not even a scandal.
Yeah.
We all just that's a whoopsie war.
Ugh.
We got into another whoopsie doodle war.
All I need to do is write a chapter in my book saying whoopsie doodle.
Right.
I'm totally exonerated.
Yeah, there's 100,000 dead civilians. And you're just like, yeah, but I said I was really sorry.
Look, I'm really sorry. And I will pay to have a guy go on each tombstone and write whoopsie doodle. So
I'm just constantly amazed that that's not a bigger deal.
Right? Where you're not just like, all of you are fired indefinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if we invaded Germany on accident, right? You're laughing differently because 9, right? But it's because we invaded a non-Western European country on accident.
It's true.
We can all look around and be
laugh. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever. Mistakes happen. Am I right?
the boats just show up in Manchester, England. They're running around the streets. Take it over.
I guess we shouldn't decide whether we go to war by who wins a game of Flippy Cup again.
The dartboard method is right out.
Oh, God.
In 2000, now we're going back a little bit, he sharply criticized leaders of the religious right as agents of intolerance. He basically singled out Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell as corrupting influences on religion and politics. But in 2007, he said, I have to say in all candor that since the nation was founded primarily on Christian principles, personally, I prefer someone who has a grounding in my faith. And he clarified it later on, saying, basically, look, here's the thing. I kind of agree with that. He did go back a little bit with that to say he'd vote for a Muslim if they thought they were the best candidate. But then again, later went back on that later on. So he, again, back and forth, right? Against the religious right in some ways, but then also saying it's a Christian nation, which is a religious right position. And then saying, well, I'd vote for a Muslim, and then later on going back again. So a lot of wishy-washy stuff when it comes to faith.
And it's if you look at the timing, it's what was politically expedient at the time.
I think so.
In 2000, it was my candidate is using.
Yeah.
Or my opponent, rather.
He was always for campaign finance reform. And so he did there throughout his career. You can look, there's a ton of campaign finance reform stuff throughout his career. In the middle of the road with the environment, they gave him a stance. The National Environmental Scorecard gave him 4 out of 7 environmental resolutions during his second session of the 109 Congress. And the 4 resolutions dealt with issues of offshore drilling, an Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, low-income energy assistance, and environmental funding. He did not like renewable energy, voted against federal funds for it. He opposed to tax credits in 2001 and 2006.
How backwards is that going to seem in 10 years?
I know, right?
Right? Yeah. In 10 or 15 years, you'd be like, wait a minute, you voted against using sunlight for electric. You voted against that. In 10 or 15 years when we're all like, that's fucking stupid, man. What? You didn't want to help us out with the free energy process that we get. It's fucking free renewable energy. And he's like, but nothing's on fire from a coal plant.
He also flipped a lot on nuclear. He went back and forth on nuclear power, initially opposing it and then going for it. So again,
where did he end up? Do you know?
I think he was against renewable energy, and I thought he was more for energy independence of the United States. Do you remember Sarah Palin, Drill Baby Drill?
Oh, I remember.
So
yeah.
I think that can sort of tell you where he wound up.
Well, I'm glad we don't use solar energy to gain energy independence. We would have to import our sunlight from other areas.
You got and you know, the Middle East has a lot of sun.
They do. They get most of it.
Yeah, and then we would just have to make all these deals with them and let them.
The sun pipelines that we would have, and
they just have like
oh my God, it's a sun spill.
Yeah, they have that big sun pipeline, and it's just one of those big fiber optic cables shooting the sun.
It's just an enormous laser beam slicing everything in half.
He was anti-choice, and that's just you could look through all out his record. Believed life began at the moment of conception. An embryo should be fully afforded human rights. You fucking idiots. What a fucking clown car that is. He voted against abortion 115 out of 119 times in the Senate.
He was sick the other 4 times. Those were sick days.
Yeah, the other times they were pumping his brain full of chemicals to keep him alive. Yeah, and he also voted against sex education and federal funding of birth control. So
that's insane.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah. And he also voted against legislation requiring insurance plans cover prescription drugs that also cover birth control. So like fucking anti-choice as you can get.
That's
that
no
dude
choices.
is just like,
how many choices do I get? You get no choices.
Dude, just like basically every woman should be pregnant.
Once the sperm is in you, there's 3 people in this room now. That's it. That's how
we're actually counting the sperm in you as 2. So yeah. In support of the Patriot Act and voted to reauthorize the Patriot Act and extend their wiretap provision. So
it was anti-privacy.
Yeah, anti-privacy. Announced in 2005 that he supported the inclusion of intelligent design teaching in schools. He said that I think there has to be, this is a quote, I think there has to be all points of view presented.
All of them.
But they have got to be thoroughly presented. Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone.
Thoroughly present that intelligent design.
So biology class will be nothing but a series of alternatives that have been presented over the course of ages on abiogenesis.
And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to, in order to tell it, you have to tell it to one person. They have to whisper it in the ear of the person next to them. And then
the
you
last person writes it down.
And that's how we record it.
Let's see. Life began as purple monkey dishwasher. Okay. Wait, I think there might be a transcription error.
He was for gun rights, but was also pushed back a little. So his record on gun rights was a little There's a couple of things that I included here that talk about being pro-gun, but there was also some anti-gun stuff in there too. Not super anti-gun.
Right.
Not like crazy, like let's ban all the guns, but like, you know, a few things like, hey, let's make background checks a little harder to get.
Maybe we should have like fully automatic hand grenade shooters or
maybe
whatever.
When you graduate kindergarten, you shouldn't get a bazooka, you know? Yeah. McCain had promoted the legalization and eventually the granting of citizenship to the estimated 12 to 20 million illegal immigrants in the United States. This was a long time ago during Reagan that he voted for that. And then in 2007, he conceded to Bill O'Reilly that passage of amnesty will permanently change the ethnic makeup of the country. And he supported a path to citizenship for estimated 12 to 20 million immigrants and the coordination with the 13-year waiting program. He had a 2007, he voted in favor of declaring English as the official language of the United States government. And he was one of the few people to sort of go after Trump about DACA when Trump was talking, basically saying we should deport the people for DACA. He says it's not conscionable to deport the dreamers, is what he had to say. So he flipped a little back and forth. He didn't like the border wall. He was basically opposed to a lot of the shit that Trump wanted to do.
He was just opposed to Trump.
Yeah.
I think like they did not, there was no love lost between those two.
Right. But he did have some positives on immigration, but also some negatives. Again, it's sort of a middle of the road, which seems very McCain-like.
But I will say, like, I think the stances he took were the more important stances. Like if the anti thing is, like English is the official language of the United States. Okay. If you're going to grant amnesty and ultimately citizenship to 12 to 20 million people,
it's a lot.
Then like one has an effect on 12 to 20 million people, and the other one is already de facto how
it's how it is anyway. And and if they have to, they'll just download Duolingo. Right. It'll be good. 2004, He voted against the federal marriage amendment, arguing that each state should be able to choose if they want same-sex marriage. He supported and failed 2006 Arizona initiative to ban same-sex marriage. 2006, he voted against the federal marriage amendment, reiterating the issue that it should be left up to the states, although in the state he was in, he wanted to ban it. So I don't know what that tells you about his
Well, that's why he wanted to leave it up to the states, because he knew that many of the states would
say
ban
no.
it,
They'd
right?
say no.
That's why states' rights people want states' rights over federal rights, because there's a recognition that, like, if it's left up to the states, that a good half of the states are going to say, like, yeah, no abortions here and no same-sex marriage, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. Or, no, maybe there's abortions here, but there's no abortions for the 5 states around us. So, so they can get part of their way. You know what I mean? I'll get my way part of the time, and I'll cut down some abortions, not all of them.
If you were to give states' rights the go-ahead on things like abortions and same-sex marriage, the entire southeast of the United States.
Yeah. 2008, he told the New York Times, this is a quote, "I think that we've proven that both parents are important to the success of a family. So no, I don't believe in gay adoption." Why? There would be 2 parents. I don't understand. Both. You didn't say a man and a woman parents. You said both parents.
Right. He later clarifies, saying he does not support a federal ban on adoption by gay parents, but he has a stance that seems to suggest
like he doesn't like it.
Right. That he has a personal view versus a policy view.
Yeah. When Trump was going after the transgender people in the military, one of the things he said was,
I love this.
He said, yet another example of why major policy announcements should be made via Twitter, which is awesome. But he said, quote, "There is no reason to force service members who are able to fight, train, and deploy to leave the military regardless of their gender identity." Right. So he did focus on that. And on the last thing I want to talk about, in 2008, he told Brett Hovell of ABC News, quote, "It's indisputable that autism is on the rise amongst children. The question is what's causing it. And we have to go back and forth. There's a strong evidence that indicates that it has to do with preservative in vaccines."
So he didn't understand science or technology. Yeah. I mean, I think that's true, right? Yeah. But with the net neutrality thing, I think that's obviously a shill to the corporations.
He thought it was a big truck or whatever.
Right, yeah. You got a truck full of internet? How many gigs can you put in my truck?
So, Tom, casket half full, casket half empty. Where do you sit?
I think you could do worse than John McCain. If you've got a Republican, I think you can do worse than John McCain.
Absolutely can.
I do think that he is a guy like any other career politician who spent 40 years or so in politics. Like, that's a guy who read the wind and did what he needed to do to get elected.
Yeah.
There were times when I was like, yeah, good John McCain. Like, I am... Like, there are times when he opposed major policies that, the government and his party put forward. And I have to say, like, there's a part of me that's like, how many guys really do that as vocally?
Right.
I don't always agree, but I like that at least he was willing to take a fucking stance now and again.
Especially on important shit like Guantanamo Bay and torture.
And immigration.
Yeah.
So, he wanted a path to citizenship and amnesty for 12 to 20 million. He called the Dreamer... that deporting the Dreamers unconscionable.
Yeah.
He did not parse his language when he disagreed with something. Yeah. Even when he was criticizing his own party. And that I admired about him. Yeah. I really did. So I'm going to go cask for John McCain overall for a Republican. Yeah. Cask half full.
I'm going to say casket 4 out of 7, just like his environmental policies. So, yeah. I think it's very easy to fall on one side, I hate the guy, to fall on the other side, I love the guy, or at least we should respect the guy. I think it's okay to have a view of John McCain that is somewhere between sainthood and Satan, right? It's okay to have that view. It's okay to have a nuanced view of a guy with a 40-year political career and not just be like, hey guys, stop posting John McCain, R.I.P., he was a jerk face. You know what I mean? Like there's a way to have a nuanced opinion about John McCain, even though I've pretty much disagreed with most of the things he did.
But like, can we talk about that for a second? Because you and I have had conversations around this general topic before. Like, disagreeing with somebody on an important subject does not automatically mean that person is a fucking monster.
Right.
Somebody, like, people are varied in the stances that they take. People change their minds on things.
Absolutely.
People's, we are a multifaceted fucking creature, and this like expectation of perfection will never be achieved. And it will certainly never be achieved in somebody that you're looking to in a leadership role who is subject to, the whims of a constituency in order to put them in place.
Yeah.
There are times we just have to accept, I think, that the nature of politics means that there are times people are going to vote against something that's a small evil in their mind in order to achieve something that's a greater good.
Yeah.
There's a pragmatism here that if we pretend our principles trump every pragmatic event, you're never going to have people who accomplish shit. It's hard to get shit done in Washington. We see it time and time again. The hardline ideologues on both sides can't get anything done.
What's interesting, too, is that there seems to be a movement, especially I'm seeing it more so on the left than I am anywhere else, of you don't agree with me, therefore I want you out of my life forever.
Yeah, you just get thrown away.
You get thrown away forever.
Right.
You disagree on one thing and someone's like, oh, get out of here. I don't ever want to hear from you again. And you're just like, it's okay to disagree on stuff. Disagreement is okay.
Right.
It's okay to have a nuanced view of certain things on occasion. That's not damaging. That's helpful to us to try to push ourselves. There's been times you and I have come into the studio, disagreed on something, talked about it, and found a middle ground between the two extremes that we had coming into the studio.
Yeah.
Two very different different stances. We didn't walk out hating each other. We said, oh, you know what? I can kind of see your point of view. And you said, oh, I can kind of see your point of view. Instead of just being like, well, great, I never want to talk to you.
I know. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
I don't have to, man. Right. I can see it. I can see it all the time.
So let me ask this, are there issues where we should draw a hard line? I think there are. I think you and I agree.
Sure.
There are some issues, right? Where I think you draw a hard line. You say, if you cross this, but I think that not every principle has to be a line in the sand.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's where we're going with this.
Yeah.
There has to be some issues where you say look, I am strongly on one side. I know where I sit on this side, but I will not draw a line in the sand that means you're garbage.
Right.
If you're on the other side of this line.
Yeah.
You those throwaway people, when you're willing to throw somebody away, man, there's a handful of things that you can't be wrong about.
Yeah.
Right. There are a handful of things you cannot get wrong.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then there's a lot more.
Yeah.
So we have to have lines in the sand, right? There are some lines that you don't.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some you just don't compromise on.
Right. But those need to be really well thought out.
Yeah.
And those need to be fewer rather than greater.
Yeah.
You are watching the beginning and the birth of the New World Order. And you want to call me crazy? Go to hell. Call me crazy all you want.
Okay, so this is a story about a YouTube conspiracy theorist. His name is Lionel Lebron. And
Are you sure it's not LeBron?
It might be
LeBron, LeBron James. I don't know. Did President Trump call him stupid? Did you see that?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. We have a racist in chief. Did you see the polls, by the way, that came out that said Trump supporters were polled and if he used the N-word, the Omarosa tapes suggest that he may have, the supporters don't care.
Yeah, of course.
They're just
they don't.
If there was ever any need for proof that if the president is throwing around the N-word, they're just oh my God, we know. That's why we hired him. What are you going to check and make sure that the Grand Dragon, did the Grand Dragon say a bad word to that black guy? We know. That's why we elected him Grand Dragon.
That's so true and sad. What's crazy is it's this stuff. It's all this stuff. If he says the N-word, they don't care. If he meets with this guy who thinks that top Democrats are part of a pedophile cult, he's whatever. And again, this is fueling that nutter group of people, the Liz Crokens of the world, who are holding up 8 fingers.
Surfing is dangerous, man.
I will say.
Somehow.
Yeah. Fucking thoughts and prayers to Liz Crokin. Thoughts
dick.
And prayers.
That's a dick move. I love it. That is a dick move.
but you know, like it's the Liz Crokins of the world who are like, they're so insane that any of this, that you know that they are sucking this down.
That's why Trump
They're
did
just
it.
like, oh my God.
You know you know that's why Trump does this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's got to be.
Yeah.
Like
Either that or he just, but he also has proven that he has no way to vet individuals either, right?
Yeah, but
so
I have to think that, like, if I'm Trump, I'm going to look at these Q people and be like, yeah, these guys are all mine. Like, I get all the Q people.
And they're loud.
Right.
They're big squeaky wheels.
And he doesn't even have to, because the Q people are fucking read into everything people, he doesn't have to openly come out and do anything in support of the Q people.
Oh, that's true.
All he has to do is do something that suggests support.
Oh my gosh, it's so easy for him.
So this is a fucking slam dunk to solidify the fucking crazy base of kooks.
Yeah.
Like if you think that the fucking Democrats run a pedophile cult, they can't get anything done. They would be found out in an hour.
I know.
They can't get, like, just think about how incompetent the Democrats
They can't even get on the same page. And then all one person has to do is leak that shit to the media.
I mean, the Democrats are like the least competent group of people ever.
I want to talk for a second because, shifting gears a little bit from this, and we don't have a story for it, but I want to talk a little bit about the primaries that just happened. Did you see the person who won the primary down in Florida?
Yeah. And you see the comment that his opponent made?
His comment,
monkey this
here's
up.
the thing, Tom. I don't know how often you use that in regular parlance, but I say monkey this thing up all the time.
Do you?
Oh, gosh, I can't. I say it all the time to black people. I constantly say it. Who says monkey this up? Who says that? Who says that? Seriously, man. Who says that? Nobody says it, number one. I mean, like I get it, right? I get it.
Look, we don't want Florida to have any black marks on its record.
And if we do, we want to make sure we can stand our ground. It's funny because like I saw that, and I know there are people who are like immediately like, that's a racist dog whistle, yada, yada, yada. And when he's saying it, you hear what he has to say. The sentence before that, he said articulate. So he made reference to an articulate black man in the previous
which
sentence,
is an insult.
which is a way to say you talk real white, young man. That's what that means, man.
I know.
Like, it doesn't mean anything else. Like when everybody's like, "What? I just said he was articulate." What does that mean? I just said he was a big, strong Negro. What does that mean? Like there's context behind these words. These words mean something,
and they have a history.
Yeah,
right?
They have a long history. That's exactly it. Yeah. They have a history of hurting other people, a history of oppressing other people.
That kind of comment is the same as when Trump, like a week or so, I can't even remember, like a week ago, referred to the Hispanic ICE agent and was like, he speaks English perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if he had called, if it was me, if I was the ICE agent, he would not call me up on stage and be like, that guy speaks English perfectly.
Yeah.
So there's a reason you're making that comment about that guy.
Yeah.
Right? I've been described in a lot of different ways, and it's never been as articulate. And it's not because I'm not articulate.
Right.
I'm quite articulate. I get paid for talking to people.
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole thing for me. But I'm never introduced as an articulate person.
Yeah.
Right? The assumption is if I'm running for fucking governor that I am articulate.
Well, the assumption is if you're black that you're not too. Right? So that's the assumption.
That's the thing. It's only worth calling out if it's exceptional.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It'd be like if he was like, well, and here's our other, and he can swim?
Yeah.
Did you guys know he can swim? And he's got good credit.
Yeah.
Oh my God. He's here on time. Oh, who would have thought?
He's married to his person who had his child. Like there's so many crappy, shitty assumptions that you make.
Right.
And the fact is I heard this guy, what I loved about his response to that was where he just was like, yeah, we're just going to rise above that shit. We're just going to rise above that. Like he can say what he wants and do what he wants. I'm not interested.
I love this guy. I watched a few videos about this guy, and I love this guy. I want to move to Florida just to live in the penis of Illinois so I could vote for this guy's long black cock.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
This is from Vanity Fair. Charged with fraud, Duncan Hunter throws his wife under the bus.
Almost literally.
So
If she would have been less damaged if she had been run over by his campaign bus.
Man, this is like a guy who's like in good times and also in good times.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, how about we put a scapegoat clause in this marriage contract?
Right.
Yeah.
So for those who didn't follow, Duncan Hunter is a Republican congressperson out of California who just stole a lot of money.
Yeah, he just
was like, I stole all my campaign money. And then when he got caught.
But he got caught. The very best part of this, though, the day his shit gets announced is the same day as the Manafort thing comes in and the Cohen flip.
Oh, I know.
So he was
it's like it didn't even happen.
Nobody even, this is the one news that nobody ever heard about because it's like basically happened on 9/11. It's like,
I love the idea that like somebody at 9/11 was like, whoo, well, that would have been a big deal.
Well, there's also somebody on 9/11 being like, these are our wedding photos.
I know. Dude, how often have you like,
I mean, I know it was like a Tuesday or whatever, but like, it was, or I don't know what day of week, but it was like a weekday. I know
that's somebody's anniversary.
But it could be somebody's anniversary. People get married during the week.
Right. Yeah. All right. So he just stole a lot of money. Like, this is what he did. He just stole like thousands and thousands of dollars.
Like, my favorite part of this is he had overdraft fees that were $37,000. And I'll tell you why. I found out why that was. They were living well above their means and constantly overdrawing their bank account, and they kept having to pay these fees, and they were dipping in the campaign money for it.
They spent $250 on an airplane ticket for their pet, like on campaign money.
Yeah.
Like
$14,000 for a family vacation to Italy. They paid for somebody's braces or something. The kids' braces.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then this guy is just like, he's like, yeah, I just gave the receipts to her. I had her do shit. Whatever.
Yeah, he blames his wife, saying, well, she handled all the finances. What did I don't know how anybody else runs their household, but there's no world where I don't know if I can afford a $14,000 vacation.
What's so funny is his wife had like a 6-figure job from the campaign. That's what's so funny is she was like the accountant or whatever, and she was getting paid by the campaign. Like a 6-figure salary.
Yeah, to steal money.
To take money from
this is a job I can do from home.
Some of the things I'm just like, it's not that much money. I'm just like, the $32 Uber ride.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
Who cares? 32.
Stop even looking at that shit. Cecil, never look at the $32 Uber ride I took off the show. Because you know what, man? I probably took a $32 Uber ride on the show. Yeah, like who cares about the little stuff? But it's the $14,000 vacation.
But it adds up, man. The amount of money that they wound up taking. So it doesn't say in the article what it all adds up to. But it says here, she was given a 6-figure salary to perform dubious responsibilities and access their credit cards.
And it says like, she probably spent a significant amount of this money, but it's like, it's your fucking wife.
Yeah.
Like you can't plead ignorance. Like, well, I don't know. I just thought we were going to Italy, even though there's no money in our checking account.
I know, right? It's like,
what?
Like at a certain point, would you just be like, honey, where did all this money come from?
You're like, you go to the ATM and it's like, no.
You go to the ATM and it won't spit your card back out. It's just like, we're done here.
Right. It's like, I'm going to get $20 for lunch. Yeah. I can't, I'll get $20 for Venice. Yeah. Like, what? The fuck?
But this is one of those things that like, it was totally missed in all that stuff.
Yeah.
And this, it came out too recently that this was one of the first guys to support Trump, by the way, which is really funny.
All the best guys. I mean, all the best guys.
This has nothing to do. I don't know. It has nothing to do, but it's
just funny.
It's just funny that this Republican is just like, how much money is in my bank account? I guess I'll plead ignorance.
I don't even know why you'd buy a seat for your pet. You can just put them in the overhead.
You can just, they'll be fine. The best part is you get a new pet when you get to the new place. And then you put that one in the overhead and you buy a new one when you come home. Yeah. It's like a pillow pet, except for you smother him with the pillow. That's how it works. So we'd like to thank our patrons. We'd like to thank all our patrons. We'd like to thank our most recent patrons, Byron, Bovril, cheapskate shit patron.
Jesus.
Jonathan, Kristen, Stephen, and Chris. Thanks so much for your generous donations. We really do appreciate it. We want to, we're not going to read any email this week. We wound up not getting a ton of email. So we're going to save the emails that we got for next time. We're also going to discontinue call to prayer until next Ramadan.
Yep.
So save your calls to prayer until next Ramadan.
So should they maybe fast on it?
Send them quickly at Ramadan. So we're looking forward to doing that. But we're gonna reinstitute it. I'll hopefully some member of our audience will remind us that such a thing is happening, because I will never know when Ramadan happens.
Mark your Ramadanians.
Yes, but we will start it up. Hopefully, we'll start receiving the calls to prayer. We'll play them throughout Ramadan, and then we'll stop. And that's when we're going to do it annually from now on during Ramadan. We want to thank David Pakman for joining us today. David was
really sharp guy,
very smart guy, a lot of fun to talk to. You can check out all his stuff at davidpakman.com. We'll put a link on this week's show notes for it. You can check out all his social media and all the YouTube and podcast stuff that he does. Really great guest and a lot of fun to talk to.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap it up for this week. We're going to leave you like we always do with the Skeptic's Creed.
Credulity is not a virtue. It's fortune cookie cutter, mommy issue, hypno-Babylon bullshit. Couched in scientician, double bubble, toil and trouble, pseudo quasi alternative, acupunctuating, pressurized, stereogram, pyramidal, free energy healing, water downward spiral, brain deadpan sales pitch, late night info docutainment. Leo, Pisces, cancer cures, detox, reflex, foot massage, death and towers, tarot cards, psychic healing, crystal balls, Bigfoot, Yeti, aliens, churches, mosques and synagogues, temples, dragons, giant worms, Atlantis, dolphins, truthers, birthers, witches, wizards, vaccine nuts, shaman healers, evangelists, conspiracy, doublespeak, stigmata, nonsense. Expose your sides. Thrust your hands, bloody, evidential, conclusive. Doubt even this.
The opinions and information provided on this podcast are intended for entertainment purposes only. All opinions are solely that of Glory Hole Studios, LLC. Cognitive Dissonance makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, currentness, suitability, or validity of any information, and will not be liable for any errors, damages, or butthurt arising from consumption. All information is provided on an as-is basis. No refunds. Produced in association with the local Dairy Council and viewers like you.